Has this ever happened to you? If you've ever tried to light up your science labs with colored lamps, you may have noticed that you can't connect labs to any of the circuit networks. This is unfortunate, but there are plenty of ways around it. Welcome, I'm Huck the Crab, and today I'll be showing off my circuit setup for adding some color to the lamps around your science labs. The circuit I designed to tackle the problem can be broken down into two simple pieces, a latch and a decoder. The latch keeps track of the last item that was inserted into the lab, and the decoder turns that signal into a set of RGB signals that set the lamp color. My original design uses a 4-piece latch and a 12-piece decoder. I imagine there are a million better ways to make latches than what I've done here, but I like to try to figure stuff out on my own. I won't go into details on this first latch, I'll explain my second latch design later. The original decoder consists of 12 pieces, and each piece is made up of 2 combinators. There's one for every color of science, and each one basically just looks for the science signal it's meant to monitor and lets the color values pass through from a constant combinator if the signal is present. In this way, the whole decoder takes in a science signal and outputs a red, a green, and a blue signal for setting lamp colors. The output colors can be set individually for each science with full precision, meaning you can go 0 to 255 on each of the 3 color channels. This is great, and it works, but we have a problem. I want to fit this combinator circuit into my existing science setup, and with the current layout we have too much stuff and not enough space. Version 2 of the circuit is much more compact. The latch has been shrunk to only half its original size, and the decoder shrunk even more, taking up only 42% of its original design. Let's talk about the improvements to the decoder, and then we can briefly go over the latch and see how it all comes together. Looking at the old decoder, I noticed I was reusing the same values for a lot of the colors. Most of the color values were either set to a full 256 or to a half value of 128. A couple colors used quarter values, meaning 64, but there were only a couple of those. So I basically just had full brightness, half brightness, or quarter brightness for each of the 3 channels, but I was mostly just using full or half brightness. The new setup uses 6 decider combinators that each can let half of a given color through. There's essentially 2 red subpixels, 2 green subpixels, and 2 blue subpixels. Each decider combinator represents 1 subpixel, so if you want that subpixel to be turned on for a given input condition, you just add that input condition as an OR to each of the subpixels you want to turn on. For example, we want red science to turn both of the red subpixels on, so we add red science to both of the red subpixel combinators. For pink science, we want full red and half blue, so we'll add pink science to both of the red subpixel combinators and one of the blue subpixel combinators. By limiting ourselves to this on-off control over the 6 subpixels, we effectively have a much smaller color range that we can access, but I still managed to get quite a good color spread out of it. I bet someone clever with more patience could come up with a better set of subpixels and maybe improve the color selection or shrink the footprint or something. The only piece missing now is the latch. The improved latch has only 2 pieces, a decider combinator and a selector combinator. The selector combinator outputs the signal with the highest value from among its inputs, and the decider combinator is set to take any input receives that is greater than 0 and output that same signal with a value of 1. When only one signal is input to the latch, it effectively remembers that signal at a value of 1 by passing it back to the input. If a second signal is added to the input that happens to be greater than 1, the selector combinator will now start outputting that new signal, and the old one will be lost from the latch and this new signal will be left in memory, the selector combinator setting it to a value of 1 from whatever it happened to be. A consequence of this design is that any new signal must have a value greater than 1 in order to overwrite the currently latched signal. This shouldn't be an issue for the case of inserting science into labs if you're producing science at roughly the same rate you're consuming it or faster, but if your inserters are only moving 1 science bag at a time, you'll need a different latch, or maybe a bigger factory. The specifics of the timing on this latch is a little more detailed than what I covered. The incoming signal has to be held for a couple ticks in order for the latch value to actually stay, and it can very occasionally latch 2 values at the same time on alternating ticks, which gets some crazy flashes, but it corrects itself when a new input is received, so it wasn't a huge issue for me. To make sure the signals are held long enough, you just have to make sure the inserters are reading on hold mode instead of pulse mode. And with that, we know how all the components of the display work. The latch reads the hand contents of the inserters that are passing science into your labs. It remembers the most recent highest signal, and then the decoder turns that signal into a set of color values to send to the lamps. The reduced footprint of version 2 lets all of those components fit nicely into the space around our fully beaconed fancy science labs, and we have enough room left over for a set of 5 whole lights. Thank you for joining me today. If you make any improvements to my design, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. I'll leave you with some hypnotic footage of my lab setup chewing through some science. Enjoy the colors.